Go ahead.
Thank you, Thomas. Um, I think one of our hopes for these just gatherings that we do from time to time is to stop in the midst of our world that is often overwhelming us. Jesus promised that we will have troubles, but that He is with us. And so just recentering in that peace. I just want to share a little short reflection and lead us into our next phase of prayer. But doing that with some recognition of how we understand greatness, because I think we're all wrestling with greatness in some capacity. We have slogans like "Make America Great Again," which, depending on what side of things you're on, that might inspire us, it might enrage us. But it's so easy in our world for us to move into political identities, to move into sides, to draw lines and boundaries, and to then compete for greatness. We are infatuated with power, so much so that we think in our imaginations that if we had power, we would act in such a way that it would be good for the world. Our own image of making the world great. Um, Jesus, in this passage from Mark that I'll read, he kind of points out this idolatry and the wrong-headedness of the disciples. So this is from Mark 9. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But the disciples kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child, whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Um, the disciples debating, arguing, competing for greatness. Who's going to be the greatest? And Jesus puts a child in their midst. The word for child here is the same Greek word as servant, slave. It's somebody that has no social standing, no status, no rank. And Jesus says, offer hospitality, welcome, receive a child. And that act of hospitality confers an identity on the one that's being received of equal standing. Yeah, they're important, maybe more important, a child. This past year, I was able to spend some time in Romania, but when I came back, I actually received a message via Facebook, because lots of the kids and families stay in touch with me when I'm in the States via Facebook. And one of the women that wrote me, she's a girl who grew up in our community center, Roma background. Many of her siblings were on the streets, living in a home without electricity, plumbing, just kind of squatting. But was able to get through elementary school, middle school. But then she was deceived by a boy, fell in love, was actually tricked into going into sex work, ended up having a child with the person she was with, and she loves her son, and she asks if her son can come to our center. And I'm here in the States, and we're asking questions like, do we have space at our community center? Do we have capacity? Is it worth helping her son when we're unsure how much our investment in her life has helped? When I was in Romania this last summer, we were doing a prayer walk through the neighborhood, and we actually prayed for this one particular family amongst others. And we walked around the corner, and the woman that we'd just been praying for came up, and she said that she saw us praying, and she said, "I need you to come to my house to pray with me and my husband, because we don't feel close to Jesus anymore." Now, this isn't usually how our prayers are answered or how our evangelism works, or when people actually come to us and ask us to share Jesus or to pray with them. But I, in that moment, felt close to Jesus just by being close to this woman, Maria. Jesus was saying to me, pray, ask, seek the one who is seeking me. Another thing that we did this last year, but have been doing the last few years, is spending time with Ukrainian refugees. There are thousands of them in our city, hundreds of thousands, millions in Europe, hundreds of thousands in Romania. We visit a school where it's all informal, but the kids are learning in their own language in Ukrainian, even though they're living in Romania. Their context is extremely insecure. Many of their fathers are fighting on the front lines. Their futures are unknown. And when we talk to them about their hopes, some of them said, "I want to play soccer for my favorite Spanish football team." Um, but others said, "I want to see my family." Others just sat in silence. All of these instances were where we were discerning the Spirit, Jesus, placing a child, placing a vulnerable one, an invisible one, a marginalized person in our midst, and saying, "Will you welcome?" And if you welcome them, you welcome me. And so I'll just leave a few questions here for you to reflect on. But this is part of our prayer, not just when we come into our own prayer times, but when we're prayerfully engaging the world. Are we attentive? And do we see the child placed by Jesus in our midst? It might be via Facebook. It might be as we walk down the streets. It might be people we haven't met yet, or immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. How are we creating space for hospitality for the marginalized? Jesus says, receive the child. And how are we encountering Jesus through those who are marginalized?